What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Busy Bariatrics podcast. If you listened to last episode, we talked all about the busy method and how I personally, as well as how I coach clients, has really helped develop the habits, patterns, and behaviors that helps people optimize their bariatric journey. Today's recording, we're going to really be talking about how building habits makes a difference. For me personally, when I was at 365 pounds, I realized that there were some habits that kind of got me there. It was regular drinking. It was habits like going to grab food in between lunch and dinner. It was habits like sleeping in or not working out or prioritizing food over other sources of dopamine chasing. All those habits slowly over time added up and is what got me to 365 pounds. The good news, though, was that the more that I really started focusing on building better habits, I was able to lose 50 pounds on my own prior to bariatric surgery, and then continue the process so that I've lost over 150 pounds total. Today's episode, I'm kind of going to give you a little bit of what I did to lose the initial 50 pounds, as well as some habits I still keep in track today in order to get success. So, prior to bariatric surgery, when I was starting the process, I had to meet with my healthcare team, and they really wanted me to start to live the lifestyle of a successful bariatric patient. Even the idea of identifying what a lifestyle of a successful bariatric patient was really difficult for me because I didn't really know anyone who had bariatric surgery in my real life. As I started to share that I was considering bariatric surgery, I actually found out that two of my bosses had bariatric surgery and both were maintaining their weight loss at an incredible rate. Some habits that I started to pick up from them is they really made it clear that you have to prioritize movement and you have to prioritize protein and you have to slow down with your eating. Those were the three big ones that they really kind of hammered home with me and said if you can get those three down, everything else really comes down to your style, flavor, and what's going to make you successful. So as I started that process, I tried to keep that in mind and went to the medical team knowing that I had to make changes. When I went for my initial consult appointment, they actually gave us a bariatric, I call it the bariatric Bible, but it was essentially the workbook that would explain what you have to do and what you need to do. And the first job at your first meeting is you had to identify one behavior goal that you could commit to from then until your next meeting. And until that behavior goal was absolutely crushed, they weren't going to give you another behavior goal. So for me, it was a long list of things like chew your food 30, go for a 5-minute walk daily, hit a 10,000 a day step goal. It was this long laundry list. So I went through the list, and the first one that I wanted to do was I picked to walk 10,000 steps a day. It seemed like something that from my previous diets, I understood the importance of exercise. And although that relationship was a little fragmented, it seemed to be like a really good place that I knew I could start and that I could work for. I, at that point, was willing to do whatever I needed to do. So I bought a Fitbit immediately, started strapping it to my wrist, and wanted to see how many steps I was getting a day, thinking how hard could 10,000 steps be? When I started my bariatric journey, I was getting about 3,000 to 4,000 steps. And I realized then that not only would I have to get close to triple what my step goal was every day, I didn't really have a clear plan of how I was going to work in all this movement. So I started with small little things like getting a 5,000 step walk in at the beginning of the morning. So I'd wake up a little bit earlier before school. I would hop on my treadmill and I would just get like a 30-minute walk in, and that could get me like 5,000 steps there. Then I would, during my prep period, I would go outside if it was still nice out and I would try to do a lap around the school. That could get me anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 extra steps. I later realized if I could map out my prep periods perfectly, I could walk down through the entire neighborhood and back to the high school. And that could be about 10,000 steps. By just kind of looking at my schedule and then developing my step goal, I was able to see that I could get those steps in just by moving things around in my calendar and optimizing it. And that really did help get the ball rolling for me and realize I could be successful with things. I then moved from there and started to find other things that could really help me get moving. I went into my next appointment and I was like really proud of myself. I'm like, yo, I hit 10,000 steps a day. They're like, that's great. Since you picked a movement goal to start, the next thing that I want you to do is work on a goal around food. So I chose to start chewing my food 25 times a meal, and I actually failed at it. I found that it was way too long. I had to slow down so much. I would get frustrated early. So I decided after like the first week, I was actually going to pivot, and I started with tracking my food. Tracking my food was the next habit that really seemed to sit and set with me. And I think it was important to realize that like I just wasn't ready for chewing my food 30 times right there, but realized that I would get to it later, but that tracking really was revelatory. Fitbit at the time and still does have a little part of their app where you could start tracking your intake. And I would slowly just decide before I'd eat anything that I would start putting it in the app and seeing how much I was eating. Depending on the day, the reason, and season, I could be relatively normal of what I thought normal was Monday to Thursday, where it might be anywhere from like 2,500 to 3,000 calories. Now, I know the average diet is supposed to be about 2,000 calories, but for someone who was 365 pounds, being at 3,000 calories seemed to be like kind of normal or at least okay for me. So I slowly started to work on things of like, okay, how can I make sure I don't go over 3,000 calories? I then also started to track what my weekends looked like. And Fridays were really tough for me because I would come home, I would get the kids home from school, and I would go to the liquor store and I would get like a case of beer and I would play a game called Chores. Chores was essentially if I unloaded the dishwasher, I would drink a beer. If I loaded the dirty dishes from the sink, I would drink a beer. I would do a load of laundry. I would drink a beer, and I would have anywhere from like 7 to 8 beers before like 7 o'clock at night while getting all the chores done for the day. And although it was fun and it made it a little bit of a game to get the activities done, I was consuming close to 5 to 6,000 calories playing a game like chores. That would lead me to being hungover for Saturday mornings, which meant I clearly was not going to work out. And even going for my walks on Saturday morning became such a like drag because so much of what I was doing was I was hungover, I was dehydrated, I wasn't feeling well, and I made it tougher on myself than I realized. And I wasn't really putting that together. I wasn't putting together the fact that drinking on Friday night meant that I was more sluggish on Saturday or that I was increasing the calories. I just kind of noticed I was about 3,000 calories on Monday to Thursday, and then I'd be about 5,000 calories when I would get to Friday. Sundays during the NFL season were actually the absolute worst. To give you an idea of some of the habits that I had prior to bariatric surgery, an NFL Sunday would consist of waking up from a night of drinking and eating excessively the night before. I would then make myself a version of the Grand Slam breakfast. So I would have pancakes, sausage from the Italian market over in Philly. I would have eggs, thick cut bacon that I'd get from the market. It was decadent, to say the least. And that was breakfast before church. I would then come home and either have a homemade cheesesteak or order a cheesesteak and wings with the family, watch the Eagles game and start to drink. And then that would be drinking that would lead up to about 4:30 when we would have Sunday dinner. Sunday dinner would be spaghetti and meatballs, more spaghetti than the meatballs, and then red wine as well as a couple Manhattans. And then I would essentially drink and have dessert during the Sunday night game. I could have anywhere from 7 to 8,000 calories on that single day. From tracking, I realized just how much I was putting myself in the hole, both on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, and realized that I was going to have to make small incremental changes. And this is going to sound kind of ridiculous, but I really did start with if I was going to have 10 beers on Friday, 10 beers on Saturday, 10 beers on Sunday, I just reduced to 9 beers each day. That may be like, Rob, you needed to reduce by so much more than that. But for me, it seemed feasible and manageable. And each week I would just go down to like, okay, maybe I just have 8 beers. And then slowly and surely, I would get down to like maybe just having like 2 beers on Friday, 2 beers on Saturday, 2 beers on Sunday. And then I'd be like, well, at that point, why don't I either have the 6 beers on Friday or the 6 beers on Sunday? that slowly turned it, instead of 6 beers to 5 beers to 4 beers to 3 beers. You get the idea. Long story short, I drank a lot prior to bariatric surgery, and it did not serve me at all. But as I slowly started tracking my intake, I was able to realize how much I could just take little shaves here and there and go down. Also, during the week, one of my habits was I would stop, because at this point I was teaching between two different high schools in my district. So I would start in the morning at one end of town, and then I would end my day at another school across town, and I would have to travel between the two. And there was a really good pizza shop in between. And I would be eating 3 slices of pizza in between either breakfast and lunch. So I would teach my morning classes where I'd have my breakfast. Then I would get in the car. I would go to the pizza shop. I would get 3 slices of pizza. And then I would go in and have my afternoon lunch after the 3 slices of pizza. And then I'd go about my day. Or I would sneak eat like another 2 slices of pizza before I picked my girls up from after school. And I would like sneak eat some fast food there. I would slowly start the habit of kind of just doing something as simple as every time that I did not stop for fast food, I would take $5 and I would put it into a piggy bank. And after tracking my intake for a while, I was realizing I was spending about $750 in fast casual food just from doing this. So by tracking, I started to realize like how dangerous it was, what I was doing, both from a calorie, but also from a expense standpoint. And I slowly started to change that behavior over. So by putting about a little bit here and a little bit there in the piggy bank, I was saving close to $500 a month. And I don't want you to think that I did that perfectly. There were times I still got pizza. There were times that I still got Taco Bell. There were times that I was still doing all this, but every time I didn't, I would take $5 and I would put it in the piggy bank. Over time, I was able to buy a treadmill and then flooring equipment and then dumbbells. And I literally took all the money that I was saving from not going to fast food, and I built an entire home gym in my basement, which would come in handy by March of 2020. Having all that was such a crazy part of the experience, because I realized just how much I was putting myself in the hole, both from a caloric standpoint as well as a financial standpoint. When I started to lose weight by stopping eating fast food as much as I did, people started to notice that I went from 365 pounds down to like 330 within like a couple months. And it was kind of depressing, because when they said, "Hey, what did you do to lose your weight?" the answer wasn't like I was doing some high intensity interval training, or I was carb cycling, or even like doing some lean caloric deficit. I would outright tell people I went from eating 3 slices of pizza in between lunch and dinner down to 2 slices of pizza in between lunch and dinner. It's a really good example for people that when you are starting out as big as I was, you really don't have to make massive wholesale changes. And when I really think about it, a lot of the times in my dieting experience prior to bariatric surgery, a lot of the reasons I failed is I was going from eating like 3,000 or 5,000 or 7,000 calories down to like 1,200 of boiled chicken, broccoli, and water. And it would be no surprise that by 2 weeks in, I would be binging ridiculous amounts of food because I just missed everything. This time was totally different, because I decided I was going to take small incremental changes and just slowly dial the needle back a little bit every time. I would then also, at every check-in appointment that I had at the pre-op phase, add in another habit, because I was crushing all of this. I eventually want to say that I was about 2,400 calories prior to bariatric surgery, after going from like 7 to 8,000. It's the power of small habits like that that really did help me do well. And I think that comes down to something that we struggle with a lot in our bariatric journeys, is we think we have to be motivated every day. There were days I was not motivated to skip pizza days, and I would still have pizza. There were days I wasn't motivated to get my steps in. It was making a commitment to myself and then continuing to do that commitment that allowed me to keep the consistency going with what I needed to do. That consistency over time is really the secret sauce that's going to get you the results that you need. So many times I have clients who are saying like, "I'm just not motivated to go to the gym." And I'm like, well, yeah, neither am I. There are a lot of times that a 5 a.m. workout just does not feel fun. September for me is a great example. I love my job as a teacher, but as a coach and a teacher and having two kids and a wife who coaches in September, there's a lot on the plate, which means I'm exhausted almost every night. And the idea of waking up at 4:30, getting into my gym clothes, doing my progress pics, and getting out the door doesn't really sound enticing to me every day. It's the fact that I keep a schedule and I keep hard and fast that I'm going to continue that schedule that allows me to get the results that I want. So, when you're looking at your own bariatric journey, building habits that are sustainable and attainable, and then slowly starting to adjust them as you move on can be a really good trick to have. But the real trick is to make sure that they're sustainable. So many times when I meet with a client and they're like, yeah, I want to work out 5 days a week. And I'm like, yeah, I love that intensity. But right now you haven't worked out in months. Let's just get to 3 days a week. And they're like, but I want to do 5 days a week. And I'm like, I totally understand that. When I'm gung ho and ready to do something, I want to do 5 days a week too. But let's make sure that we can get 3 days a week. It's kind of weird. Most clients will kind of understand that when we go over our one-to-one and our kickoff call. But if I'm looking back in coaching, some of my clients who have struggled the most came from the fact that they were really dead set that they needed to do 5 days a week and that they really were kind of like, we're going to go all or nothing. And that all or nothing pattern is something that we call dichotomous thinking. It's the idea that we either have to go to the extreme to get results or nothing is going to work. Sometimes how I help clients overcome that and work on that is saying, okay, let's reframe what we think a workout is. Let's lift 3 days a week and then maybe go for an intentional walk 2 days a week. So you're still getting 5 days a week. Or let's take 5 days a week of training and let's add in 2 walking days that go with it as you move on. Or even taking a day or two off the lifting schedule and really taking that time to meal prep, meal plan, and get everything done for the week can actually have greater results long term. So many times in my own personal journey and when I'm coaching clients, I realize that we all do want to do the workouts because that's kind of like the cool dopamine hit that we can chase and enjoy, and the endorphins go up. But it really is the boring, consistent work of planning out our meals, measuring out our food, making sure that our calendar reflects our goals is really going to do the heavy lifting for us. It's why building habits really is the most important part of your bariatric journey. Whatever habits you build and develop are going to really be probably the biggest factors of your success outside of your mindset. I've talked to tons of people in the bariatric community who even felt that bariatric surgery was just another idea or fad in a long list of things they've tried and didn't work. And realizing that from a mindset perspective, I was like, well, did you believe it would work? And they're like, not really, no. And I'm like, well, then how did you think you were going to get results? Just something as simple as flipping your mindset of I'm building habits that will make me be successful is good. But even better is the idea of believing that these habits are going to be successful. I had to really work on the mental and emotional parts of tracking my food will help me be successful. Going on a step goal every day will help me be successful. Watching my caloric intake will help me be successful. The more I started to really believe in myself on how these habits would work, the more I started to get the results. Seeing something as simple as every time I don't get fast food, I'm saving money made me a little bit more successful. Putting that money towards things that made me healthy helped me be more successful. If you're noticing a pattern, it's because the more we kind of build these habits in, the less you really think about them and they just become part of your everyday life. Even today, like my morning routine really is almost absolutely the same. I wake up, I go to the bathroom, I step on the scale, and then I check my bank account. I always like knowing where my scale stands and where my bank balance stands. I then will brush my teeth. I will go downstairs. I will get dressed. I then kind of start I'll make my pre workout drink. I'll mix that together. I'll get my shoes on, and then I'll have my pre workout meal. And then I head out the door for my workout. The fact that I don't even flinch when I talk about that is the proof of the power of habit and how just slowly developing that and working over and over and over again can really get you some great results. That's really where it comes down to. When you're really looking at it, it's just like we said, you need to have this mindset shift of bariatric surgery isn't a diet, it's a lifestyle. So much of what I do and teach my clients is that it really isn't a diet or another 3 month process of working with a coach. It's developing a lifestyle that you can actually do even when you're done coaching with me. I do have programs where if you like what we do, you can stay in at a very affordable option that allows you to get your workouts, your nutrition, everything kind of in one place so that you have it, but you don't necessarily need that really intense coaching option every single week for the rest of your life. For some, it's that they've developed this habit and lifestyle of they like going to the gym. They like planning out their meals. They like having freedom on the weekends to go to a restaurant or hang out with their friends. Because the lifestyle is built, their mindset no longer thinks that they are dieting or restricting themselves. It's that this is just who they are and this is how they identify for now. So, where the surgery really does help with the physical limitations, the habits you put in the habits that you put in place really can help you with the mindset of bariatric surgery. If you're listening at home, those blah, blah is when I realize I'm tripping over my words. And I think I'm tripping over my words because I'm getting excited talking about it. And I kind of want to spill out to the next point. So if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see that I'm doing like these weird faces when I blah, blah, blah. But that's really just me getting some jitters out. Because even now talking about it, I still get excited talking of how we've been able to help clients overcome this while I've really overcome it myself. So again, building these micro habits in place can really have some good results. And those micro habits are also sometimes called anchor habits. So for an example, going back to my journey, the idea of tracking your food. A lot of the times people think they have to track and be in a perfect calorie deficit from day one. And yeah, that is a finished micro habit, is to have a perfect tracker. And even every day, you're not going to have a perfect tracker, but that's like a tale for another day. But the micro habit could just be like tracking one meal a day. And then as you get one meal a day under your belt, starting to go for 2 meals a day. Then that 2 meals a day being, I'm going to do a full day of tracking. Then it could be that I'm doing a full week of tracking. Slowly, from those being those micro habits based off the anchor habit of tracking one meal a day, they slowly grow and develop and cause this snowball effect where all of your work comes in. The other reason why we coach it and teach it that way in Busy Bariatrics is we don't want you to feel overwhelmed by the entire process. When you are struggling with something, a phrase that we use in Busy Bariatrics a lot is that we don't sit in our issues. And I think that's a really important thing to remember in your bariatric journey is if you've hired a coach, you should absolutely be telling them where you're struggling so they can help get you in there. The other part is we bring in that level of accountability when it comes to your habits. We make sure that you're doing what you're doing by both having our daily check-in forms, but also with our bi-weekly check-ins and our meeting calls where we go over what habits we're working on, how did they go, how did they develop. There's something that they've shown that 80% of people who have that level of accountability get more things done. So just knowing that you have to fill out your check-in form every week, or that you are having a bi-weekly one-to-one call with your coach, or that you're going to get feedback weekly on how you did with your goals can be just enough to be like, you know what, instead of that all or nothing mindset that we talked about with dichotomous thinking, now it's more of a, you know what, let me just get that done. I think it's one of the coolest things is check-in forms are due Wednesday in Busy Bariatrics. So many of my clients will schedule a half an hour out of their day on either Tuesday and Wednesday. They will sit and they will journal and get their check-in forms done. And they treat it almost like a mini spa session. The small habit there is having time to do your check-in form. And then because it's anchored on their calendar, it allows you to kind of develop and move everything else through. And you can start doing that today. So things just as simple as anchoring what you need to get done onto your calendar and then working towards developing it in that time does a really good job. So the final part of building habits is making sure that your environment reflects those new habits. This one gets a little bit tricky because building a supportive environment looks different for everyone. When you're thinking about your supportive environment, I want you to think about who is going to be in your group or your circle. I always joke when starting your bariatric journey, you need both a coach and a cheerleader. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to hire a coach, But you do need someone who's going to give you clear, actionable items to work on, to drive on, and almost keep an objective view while still keeping a cheerleader. Your cheerleader is that person who kind of roots you on, hypes you up, and is proud of you no matter what. How that looks different is really simple. If you had a rough week and you tracked 3 out of your 7 days, your coach would probably tell you, okay, that's great. Let's work on 4 days a week the next week. That's coaching. You take them where they're at and you develop them a little bit better. Your cheerleader is going to celebrate the fact of, hey, you used to not track at all and you're up to 3 days. That's awesome. Keep up the good work. They kind of take where you're from in the back and they move you to where and celebrate where you're at now. Having that balance of looking at where you've come from and where you're going really does allow you to have a full perspective of the process. One of the reasons I personally think I've been so successful in my bariatric journey is because I still have goals in front of me that I let my coaches help me with. Having something that I'm looking forward to and working and driving towards allows me to get the results that I want for a long-term thought. So, how do we coach habits in busy bariatrics? Well, when we coach habits, we really do start by doing an audit of everything else in the busy method. So we look at your habits around how you're tracking by looking at your first 2 weeks of food tracking in our system. We look at how you do with getting your work done with your movement assessment, your form videos, everything else. Did you get that done? How often does your calendar reflect that? So we're going to take that holistic approach to everything and then really see where you're at to make your micro anchors so we can really develop and drive towards what we need. That allows us to meet you where you're at while still driving great results. And depending on where you're at, you can still get amazing results at all of those ways and get it through, and then celebrate by having healthy forms of dopamine with it. So, the big question that I'm going to leave you with at the end of this episode is, where do you want to be after bariatric surgery? And if that's where you want to be after bariatric surgery, what are the habits of someone who looks like that does? For an example, if you want to be a marathon runner after bariatric surgery, do you have the habits of a marathon runner in place? Are you running on a certain schedule? Are you pushing your PR limits? Are you fueling your success? If you want to have a dream physique after bariatric surgery, are you building muscle in the gym? Are you eating correctly? Are you giving yourself days to rest and recover? So working with your goal and then working backwards on the habits that you can build can really be an actionable item that you could journal today. If you're struggling with figuring out how to do that, we actually have a free habit assessment that we give. It is a free 30-minute call with someone from our team who can help you really develop the habits you need based around the goals that you want. In our next episode, we're actually going to then look at the aspects of nutrition that we have to work on and how that can develop success long term. So, as always, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you like what you heard, please feel free to leave a 5-star rating and review to be entered for a drawing on Legion. And if you liked what you saw and are watching this on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. As always, I'm Rob DeMedio, and keep getting busy.